Hey, can I tell you something crazy that happened to me last night? I seriously still can't explain it, and it's really starting to freak me out. So I went to bed as normal, right? Just a typical Tuesday night, nothing out of the ordinary. I woke up at like around 3 to use the bathroom, and that's when I first noticed it. My arms were covered in scratches. Really faint ones, but still scratched up all the same. I thought maybe I just scratched myself in my sleep, even though that's never happened before. Anyway, I didn't think too much of it and went back to bed. But when I woke up again later in the morning, things got seriously weird. The scratches had gotten way worse. We're talking deep, red gashes up and down both arms. It looked like I had been clawed by a wild animal or something. There was even some dried blood around the deepest cuts. At this point, I started panicking a bit. I mean, what the hell happened while I was sleeping to make me get all scratched up like that? Did I do it to myself without realizing it? Was it some kind of allergic reaction? The more I thought about it, the more freaked out I got. Things only got more bizarre from there. I felt an urge to go check myself out in the mirror to get a better look at the scratches. But right as I started walking to the bathroom, some deep instinct kicked in, and I froze. It was like there was a voice in my head screaming, "Do not look in the mirror." I can't explain why looking in the mirror felt so wrong at that moment. I stood there paralyzed for a solid minute, battling the increasingly intense urge to see my reflection. It took everything in me to force myself to walk away. I decided to try and distract myself with some chores around the apartment. But I couldn't shake that feeling of dread in my gut. It grew stronger every minute, like the mirror was pulling me toward it. The rational part of my brain knew something was very wrong here. But the curiosity was almost unbearable. After about an hour, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was in that mirror. I stood in front of the bathroom sink, took a deep breath, and forced myself to look up. What I saw made my blood run cold. Staring back at me was me, but not really. The eyes were jet black pits, like endless dark tunnels. The mouth was stretched into an inhuman grin, revealing a row of pointed, jagged teeth. And the skin, oh God, the skin. It was mottled in gray with strange symbols carved deep into the flesh. I recoiled in horror, but I couldn't look away. The thing in the mirror started laughing, an awful guttural sound. Its pitch-black eyes bored into mine as it slowly dragged one long, claw-like finger down the glass, making an awful squeaking noise. That's when the light bulb above the sink exploded, making me scream and stumble backward. I bolted out of the bathroom and started frantically gathering my things. I knew I had to get the hell out of that apartment. Just as I got to the front door, all the lights cut out, plunging the place into darkness. Then came the whispers. From every dark corner of the rooms, I heard raspy, inhuman voices whispering my name, saying that I could never escape. I flung open the door and ran out into the daylight, not daring to look back. I jumped in my car and just started driving, with no destination in mind. I could still hear faint whispers coming from the back seat. Something evil had emerged from the mirror and attached itself to me. Even now, hours later, sitting here telling you this story, I can feel its sinister presence close by, watching and waiting. I'm honestly terrified of what the night will bring when darkness falls again. But I know one thing for sure. I will never, ever look in a mirror again. You know me. I've always been obsessed with exploring creepy abandoned places. I don't know why exactly, but there's just something so intriguing about the history behind them, you know? The mystery draws me in every time, even though I know most people think I'm nuts for it. But I can't help myself. So when I caught wind from a friend that there was this old beat-up house on the outskirts of town that had been empty for literal decades, I was instantly like, yep, gotta check that place out. The fact that it was supposedly so dilapidated and falling apart made it even more enticing to me. I knew with a spot like that I could be in for some seriously cool urban exploring. So I decided right then and there that I was going to go scope it out. The house was tucked away at the end of a long, winding dirt road, surrounded by overgrown trees and bushes. As I pulled up, I could see the weathered siding, boarded-up windows, and sagging porch. The place looked like it was about to collapse in on itself. Perfect, I thought. I parked my car out front and approached the front door. There was a rusty padlock hanging from the handle that I easily broke off with a rock. With a deep breath, I turned the knob and the door creaked open. A musty scent washed over me as I shone my flashlight around what appeared to be the living room. There was an old faded couch and chair, covered in layers of dust and dirt. The wallpaper was peeling, and the floorboards groaned under my feet. I wandered through the first floor, finding the kitchen, dining room, and a couple of other cluttered rooms. It was clear no one had lived here for a very long time. Just as I was about to head upstairs, something caught my eye. Tucked away in the back corner of the living room was an old TV stand, and on it sat a VCR. That's strange, I thought. I walked over to take a closer look and noticed there was a tape on top of it. It was labeled simply, "Watch Me." A chill ran down my spine, but my curiosity got the best of me. I had to see what was on that tape. I grabbed the VHS and headed back outside to my car, where I kept a portable TV and VCR for occasions like this. I plugged it in and inserted the tape, hesitating only for a moment before hitting play. At first, there was only static, and then a black screen. Just as I was about to hit stop, the image of a dimly lit room flickered onto the screen. It looked almost like a basement, with a concrete floor and cinder block walls. A few more seconds passed, and then a dark figure slowly walked into view. It was wearing a long black hooded cloak that obscured its face. The thing reached up with gloved hands and pulled its hood back. I gasped and nearly dropped the remote. The creature's face was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The skin was dark gray and looked wet and shiny. It had no nose, just slits for nostrils like a reptile. The eyes were solid black orbs that reflected no light. And the mouth, it stretched unnaturally wide, with rows of tiny, razor-sharp-looking teeth. I had seen enough horror movies to recognize this thing was not human. The creature stared directly into the camera, giving me the feeling it could see me through the screen. It then slowly raised one gloved hand and beckoned me closer with its long, bony fingers. A distorted whisper emanated from the TV speakers. "Come to me." I jumped back in fright, my heart pounding. The creature let out an inhuman wail, and the tape cut to static again. I frantically hit eject and pulled out the VHS, nearly snapping it in half. I wanted it as far away from me as possible. What the hell had I just watched? Against my better judgment, I decided I had to go back to the house. As terrified as I was, I had to know where that tape came from. I had to find answers. When I went back in, I realized I had made a huge mistake. I felt like someone or something was watching me from the shadows. The sun was starting to set, and I wanted to be out of there before it got dark. I quickly made my way to the basement door. My hands shook as I pulled it open and flipped on my flashlight. The smell of damp earth and decay hit me as I carefully went down the creaky stairs. I swept my light around and froze. There, on the wall directly across from the stairs, was a strange symbol painted in what looked like blood. Right below it sat an old TV and VCR on a wooden stand. At that moment, I knew I was in danger. My fight or flight instincts kicked in, and I turned to run up the stairs. Halfway up, I felt a cold, clammy hand grab my ankle. I screamed and pulled free, not daring to look back. I sprinted to my car and peeled out of there like a madman. As I sped down the dirt road, I could see the abandoned house getting smaller and smaller in my rearview mirror until it faded out of sight. I refused to go near that place again. It's been 3 weeks now, and I still can't get that video out of my head. I didn't tell anyone else about what I found in that house, and I threw the VHS tape away. Sometimes at night, I see brief glimpses of that creature's face in my nightmares. Its whispers echo in my mind. "Come to me." When I close my eyes, I can see its unnatural smile beckoning me into the darkness. I'm starting to wonder if I'll ever have a full night's rest again. During the day, I find myself looking over my shoulder frequently. My friends have noticed my strange behavior and keep asking me what's wrong, but there's no way I can tell them the truth. They'd never believe what I saw on that tape was real. Hell, I'm not even sure I believe it. Maybe I'm losing my mind. But then, I remember that symbol painted in blood on the basement wall. And I know that tape wasn't just some Hollywood special effect. Whatever summoned me to that house is evil beyond comprehension. And I'm terrified that one day it will come for me. That hooded figure is branded in my memory, a haunting presence I can't seem to escape. Sometimes I wonder if I should have just burned that tape without watching it. Curiosity has cursed me. All I know is I can never go searching in abandoned places again. Now I know that true darkness exists in this world, hidden in the shadows and waiting for its next victim. I fear that darkness has already caught my scent. It's only a matter of time. My boyfriend Mike has been acting really weird lately. It started a few weeks ago. He would sometimes talk or even shout in his sleep. I didn't think much of it at first. Lots of people talk in their sleep, right? But the things he was saying were kind of strange and creepy. One night as we were going to bed, he suddenly sat up, eyes wide open, and said in this eerie voice, "She's coming for you, and there's nothing you can do to stop her." I was so startled, I nearly fell out of bed. "Mike, what are you talking about?" I asked, but he just laid back down and started softly snoring. The next morning when I asked him about it, he claimed he didn't remember saying anything during the night. But over the next few nights, the weird sleep talking continued. He would mumble things like, "You can't hide from her, and she's going to find you." It was bizarre and more than a little creepy. I tried to shrug it off as just a strange sleep disorder, but things got even scarier a few nights later. Mike suddenly leapt out of bed and began banging on the bedroom door, shouting, "Let me out, for God's sake, let me out." I jumped up and tried to restrain him, asking what was wrong. He fought me violently, his eyes crazed. For a moment, it was like he didn't even recognize me. After a few minutes, he seemed to snap out of it and collapsed back into bed. The next morning, he again claimed to have no memory of the incident. But at this point, I was genuinely freaked out. This was more than just talking in his sleep. The look of sheer terror in his eyes, his violent behavior, something was very wrong. I decided to start locking our bedroom door at night in case he tried to wander off in that confused state and hurt himself. I also began gently prodding him for any clues. "Mike, do you remember what you dream about at night?" I would ask over breakfast. He got defensive, insisting he never remembered any dreams or nighttime disruptions. But one night he woke me up by screaming, "Get away from me!" and swiping his arms in front of his face like he was fending off an attacker. When I tried asking what he saw, in his panicked state he yelled, "The woman! Can't you see her?" The next morning I sat Mike down for a serious talk. "I'm worried you may be dealing with something medical or psychological," I told him. "These vivid night terrors about some woman, do you have any idea what they could be about?" Mike shut down again, insisting he recalled none of it. "Just drop it already," he snapped. "It's not a big deal." But I knew I couldn't just ignore this. His erratic nighttime behavior was scaring us both. That week I convinced Mike to see a doctor and describe what had been happening. The doctor found nothing physically wrong with him, but suggested doing a sleep study to monitor his brain activity at night. Reluctantly, Mike agreed to do it. The next day we went to a clinic that monitored sleep disorders. They hooked Mike up to a bunch of electrodes on his head to track his nighttime brain waves. As we settled in for the night, I hoped we would finally get some answers. Mike fell asleep quickly as I watched nervously from my cot across the room. After a few hours, the quiet was shattered by Mike suddenly sitting bolt upright and letting out a blood-curdling scream. He thrashed around, yelling, "Leave us alone, get away!" The doctors and nurses burst in, trying to restrain him as I cried out, "Mike, snap out of it." After injecting him with a sedative, they got him to lie back down. But for the rest of the night, the monitors showed his brainwaves going haywire every time he entered REM sleep. The clinic kept Mike for observation for 2 days. The doctors evaluated the sleep study results and ran some psychological tests. In the end, they concluded Mike was being plagued by severe night terrors, vivid, horrifying dreams that the brain perceived as reality. Medication could suppress the REM sleep cycle and minimize the episodes. When Mike was discharged with a prescription, I was relieved we finally had an answer, but I still wondered what was causing the night terrors in the first place. Why was Mike so fixated on this phantom woman haunting his dreams? The medication helped for a while, reducing the frequency of Mike's violent outbursts at night. But it made him tired and groggy during the day, and it didn't stop the creepy sleep talking. He would still mumble about her finding us and not being able to hide. One night I woke to Mike whimpering in fear. When I tried to comfort him, he recoiled from me trembling and said, "Don't touch me. I don't know who you are anymore." It broke my heart for him to look at me with such suspicion and dread. I pleaded with him to tell me more about this woman that had him so terrified. I just wanted to understand what he was seeing in his dreams. "Help me help you, Mike," I urged. "Maybe we can figure out why this is happening if we know what she wants." "I told you, I don't remember any dreams or whatever crazy shit I say at night," Mike protested. But I was determined to get to the root cause of the night terrors. So the next morning over breakfast, I took a new gentle approach. "Mike, I read online that people with night terrors often have them because of stress or trauma in their life," I said. "Is there anything bothering you or weighing on your mind that I don't know about?" I took his hand, looking into his eyes with compassion. Mike chewed his cereal and shook his head. "Nope, I'm all good. Never been better," he said with an unconvincing smile. I could tell he just wanted me to leave this alone. But my gut told me something was hidden beneath the surface. That night I pretended to fall asleep next to Mike, but I kept my eyes open a slit. Sure enough, about an hour after we lay down, Mike began mumbling, "Go away. Haven't you done enough?" He sounded so distraught it made my skin crawl. His tortured whispers continued as I racked my brain trying to figure out what traumatic events in his past could be fueling these terrifying dreams. Suddenly Mike screamed, "Megan, stop!" "Megan?" I sat up in shock. Who was Megan? Mike had never mentioned knowing anyone by that name before. When I tried to press him about it in the morning, he shut me down as usual. But now I was convinced his night terrors were linked to some buried trauma with this mystery woman, Megan. I started doing some digging on my own. When Mike was in the shower, I pulled up his phone contacts but saw no Megan listed. I quietly asked his friends if he had ever mentioned that name, but they all just gave me confused shrugs. For days I scoured old boxes of Mike's stuff, looking for any clues about a Megan in his past. On one of my secret searches, I stumbled on an old photo of Mike from his college days. Scribbled on the back was a note. "Me and Mikey at the lake. Spring break, 06. The picture showed Mike grinning with his arm around a pretty brunette, who must have been Megan. I was dying to confront Mike about it, but I knew he would just get angry at me for snooping. For the next week, Mike's nighttime ramblings grew darker and more troubling. Twisted things like, "I had no choice, she made me do it," and "Oh God, the blood never washes off." His screams were hair-raising. I found myself afraid to even sleep next to him anymore. One night I was jolted awake by the loud crash of glass shattering. When I ran into the living room, I saw Mike had smashed our front window. He stood in the middle of the room, eyes glazed over and a strange smile on his face. "She'll never tell now," he said with a small giggle. "They'll never find her." Blood ran down his arms from where he had bashed the window, but he didn't seem to notice. I tried to snap him out of his haze, but I could tell this was one of his worst night terror episodes yet. After that horrific incident, I knew I had to take drastic action. The next day while Mike was at work, I called his doctor and confessed my suspicions about a buried trauma involving someone named Megan. I suggested Mike may need counseling to uncover repressed memories that were now erupting into these dangerous nightly terrors. When Mike got home, I sat him down for another serious talk. "I'm worried for your safety and health, honey," I told him. "I really think you need to see a psychiatrist and try to uncover what's causing these increasingly scary nightmares. Otherwise, I'll have to leave." As painful as it was, I needed to give him this ultimatum. Mike's eyes flashed with anger briefly, but finally he put his head in his hands and sighed heavily. "You're right, babe," he said quietly. "I need help." I exhaled with relief that he was willing to try counseling. I prayed it would finally shed light on what had happened with this mysterious Megan. In his first therapy session, Mike could only haltingly describe fragments of the nightmares that plagued him. The psychiatrist listened closely, studying Mike with narrowed eyes. In the end, he suggested trying hypnotherapy to access Mike's buried memories. As Mike kept going to hypnotherapy, I noticed his regular nightmares lessening in intensity, but he remained strangely quiet and withdrawn in his daily life. I tried to get him to open up about what was being uncovered in his therapy, but he only replied, "I don't want to talk about it." Then one night, Mike woke me up by gently touching my shoulder. His face was pale and haunted. "It's over now," he whispered. "I remembered everything. You'll never have to be afraid of me again." A chill went through me as I sensed the implications of his grim words. The next morning when I got up, Mike was already gone. His toothbrush, his clothes, his car, all missing. There was only one thing left on the bed, the old photo of Mike with Megan that I had found. On the back, Mike had written a short, chilling note. "She loved me once, but I let the darkness take over. I'm so sorry for all the pain I've caused you. Some stains can never wash clean." My hand shaking, I turned the photo over. Megan's smiling face gazed up at me, but someone had scribbled over it darkly in black ink until she was completely obscured. Just a black void where her face had been. A final violent nightmare seemed to have unearthed the buried secrets of what Mike did to Megan all those years ago. And rather than drag me further into that darkness, he had fled. I sank onto the bed and sobbed, both for Megan and the anguished man I loved, but could not save from his past sins. Some doors should never be opened, I realized too late. I would never see Mike again, but on some unsettled nights, I hear his tortured cries echoing back to me from my own dreams. The black void where Megan's face used to be still haunts us both.